Welcome to the Our Purposeful Life Parent Connect podcast. Let's face it, parenting is hard. Culture has made it even more difficult. But thankfully, we do not have to do life alone. Come join us as we discover what God says about us and about our children. Come explore ways that we can encourage and equip our children to live out their God-given identity and purpose here on this earth. Join in on the conversation and let's live life on purpose together. Well, hi, welcome. My name's Nathan Hansen, and this is my wife, Dana, and we are here for the Parent Connect podcast. This is where we talk about parent conversations. We talk about things that you're going to talk about with your kids. And so today we are tackling a important topic. It's a topic that maybe people are a little bit worried to jump into, so that's why we're here. We're here to talk about dating. And so we're going to go through some questions and answers. And before we do that, though, I want to just do some background about what you need to know. Most people, I think, aren't really looking forward to having dating talks with their kids. It's a little awkward. It's a little scary, maybe. But I'll tell you what, we had a conversation recently with a couple of our kids, and it was actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so it's the kind of conversation where it's real, it's important, and you can really get into their heart and really know what they're thinking and what's going on in there. So if you can be ready and equipped, and if you can kind of get past that awkward first little bit, it's pretty cool.
It's really fun.
And it's important, guys. Like, dating was not easy when we did it, and it's not like it used to be. Mm-hmm. So dating is way different now with our culture, with the way that technology kind of throws gas on the fire of everything.
And I remember when we were dating, we had calling cards to call each other. So that was a lot different than just picking up your cell phone. I don't even know if kids know what long distance phone calls mean anymore.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, you remember that? You bought the cards, and that way you had like 5 cents per minute or whatever, or you had to call after 6 p.m. So we used those a lot. When we were dating, I probably should have called you more and used those calling cards more. But it's different. That's just one silly example of how it ain't like it used to be. Mm-hmm. And so it's important. It's scary. There's a lot going on. But you can be hopeful because no matter what our culture is like, God's bigger than that, and God cares about their hearts, and He loves your kids more than we even love our kids. Mm-hmm. And so don't be afraid of this topic. And you might be listening to this and your kids are like 4. And so it's obviously a little bit too early to talk about dating. Yeah. But you can, it's never too early. It's never too late. You can always be praying for them and praying for their hearts and getting yourself prepared for this.
Well, and praying for their future spouse too. That's always a good thing to start praying about, no matter how old your kid is.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I think the other thing that you can be working on right now is what we always talk about, which is, what does your kid think about God? Mm-hmm. How well does your child know God? How often are they bumping into Jesus in their daily walk, in their weekly, in their monthly? And so there's a quote by Tozer that I like, which is, what comes into your mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you. And so what that means is that our opinion or our feeling about God is crucial. And so when your child, if they think about God as this rules, controlling, trying to spoil your fun, if that's what they think of when they think of God and when they think of the Bible, well, then they're going to approach dating and rules in a certain way. Mm-hmm. But if they know God and love God, and they know that God loves them, and God invented joy and beauty, if they know and trust God, then they're going to understand. These rules better. Mm-hmm. I will start out with an analogy.
Oh.
That's always what I do.
Yeah.
So imagine you're playing soccer. I'm not a soccer player, but there are those who play soccer. And imagine you're on a cliff. I don't know why you'd make a soccer field on a cliff, but let's say you did. And so you know that if you go a couple feet out of bounds, if you kick the ball out of bounds, it's going to go off the edge of the cliff. You have a lot of freedom in that because there's no walls, there's no fences, but you actually don't have as much freedom to play because you know if you kick the ball out of bounds, it's gone. And if you yourself go too far out of bounds, you're gone. And so in a way, the more fences you have around that field to protect you from falling off the edge, actually the freer you can be in playing the game.
You can go all out.
You can go all out. You can kick it as hard as you want. You can run as hard as you want. You don't have to constantly be surveying where you're at on the field. And so in the same way, having rules, laws in place, boundaries in place, that can make dating be a lot more free, actually. And so that's a principle that we think is pretty important. As we're talking a lot about rules, a lot about principles, we want to make sure that we emphasize that these aren't just old-fashioned rules to ruin your fun and to prove that you're a good kid. They're actually designed to keep you safe and to make life more fun.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the background thoughts before we jump into some questions and answers. And so that's what we're going to do today, just because we want you to be equipped. We want you to be ready so that when your kids are ready for this conversation, or maybe even a little bit before they're in that zone, that you feel like you're ready to have this conversation. So we'll jump in and we'll ask some questions. So first question.
Okay.
When is it okay to date? So if your kid asks you that, hey mom, when can I date? What's a principle behind that?
That's a good question and one to kind of think about. I kind of like to look at it looking at M&Ms and TNT is how I kind of look at it. M&Ms are nice and sweet, my favorite candy, especially if they're peanut M&Ms. And TNT is explosive. So dating can be sweet, but it can also be explosive. And so you kind of want to make sure that your kid is ready. So the M's for M&M are mature. Are they mature enough? And what is their motivation? And the T's are they teachable? And is the timing right and stuff? So let's go back to the first M, mature. Are they mature enough to start dating? Well, I think one way to answer that is, are they courageous enough to have boundaries and to express them to the person that they're wanting to date? Are they able to say no if the person they're dating wants them to do something that they don't want to do? They have to be mature enough to be willing to do that. Another thing to think about is when you're starting to date, not only are you dating to get to know somebody, but you're also learning how to take care of them and care for their heart and care for their emotions and their feelings and stuff. And so are they ready to take on somebody else's heart and care for them? You need a certain level of maturity for that. I think another thing to think about is how well do they know themselves? Do they know what their strengths are or their weaknesses? Do they understand their own feelings and that kind of stuff? Because you need to have a certain level of maturity to kind of know what you're thinking and feeling before you bring in somebody else. And then are they able to balance this new relationship with the other things that they're having to do, whether it's school or family or sports? Can they bring in that other relationship and kind of balance all of that? And so those are things to think about when it comes to, are they mature enough?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That maturity is important. The worst case scenario is you have two immature people bringing their immaturity together. That's just not going to work.
No.
So that's a crucial first step. I think the next M is motivation. And so you always start with why. You start with, well, why? If you're, let's say that your child came to you and said, hey, I want to date, or I want to start dating. Always a good idea to ask the why. Now, not from the interrogation or from the accusation why, but more from the curiosity of, oh, cool, tell me more about that. I want to know why, literally. And so that's tricky. You, as a parent, you're always kind of doing the inquisition there, but you just need to work on that so that you can really ask why. And so maybe their motivation is solid, right? Maybe God's leading them in that direction. Maybe they have someone that they really respect and care about, and they want to get to know them better. Maybe they're, getting older and, they're starting to think about what marriage would look like or that next step. And so then dating might make sense. But on the other side, are they just infatuated with this new cute person who just happened to show up to their dorm room, on the first day of college,
for example. Maybe you have a...
Yeah, maybe. That happens.
I don't resemble that comment at all.
That happens. Are they focused on serving someone and being again mature, or are they just needing? Well, if that's what their motivation is, that's just not a good place to be. And so I think that motivation is crucial. So then the next thing, the TNT, as you said, is are they teachable and what's the timing? And so teachable is so important. And that's, again, something where it's never too early to start and it's never too late to start. There's grace, but you need to help your kids be teachable, have a teachable spirit. And so if you know that if they make a mistake with dating and you talk to them and they're willing to change and listen and try harder next time, that's actually helpful. Like you could work and walk through this with them. They can be held accountable. So that's a good sign that they might be ready to go down the dating path, because it's a winding path and you want to make sure they're
and nobody
teachable.
does it perfect and stuff. So we're all learning and growing as we go.
Yeah, and then again, you mentioned it earlier about the timing. So there are good times to start a dating relationship, and there are bad times. And if they're just feeling pressure because all their friends at school are dating, and they don't want to be the odd person out or the loser who doesn't have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, well, obviously that timing is not awesome. And then if they're right in the middle of something else that's really important, and it just might not be a great time. It might not be a no. It might be a not yet. Oftentimes, God will give us a not yet to really important, good dreams. And again, just it circles back to praying with them and saying, is this God's will and is this God's will now? So the timing's crucial.
Yeah, definitely.
So then they might ask, what is the purpose of dating? Or maybe you would ask that as parents, like, why do you even date? And maybe that hasn't been something that you've really analyzed or thought about. And so there's a lot of reasons to start dating. And so some of them are really good. It's a good way to deepen a friendship. It's a good way, again, to move towards marriage. It seems crazy to talk about that with a teenage kid, but we got married at 21 and 22. And so if you think about a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old, they could be literally 3 to 10 years away from dating.
Yeah.
Now, of course, they could be a lot farther than that, but the time to start learning about these things is while they're under your roof in some ways. And so whether they start dating then or not, it's a good time to have these conversations about dating so that when the time is ready, that they're ready. And so there's other reasons to date. It's a time to learn more about how to have any sort of interpersonal relationships. How do you handle conflict? How do you communicate? That's a good testing ground in learning more about yourself. And then again, ultimately, dating is designed to help you know if you're ready to marry this person, if this is who God has for you. And so ultimately, that's the final reason to start dating. Okay, so with that question, hey, I've got another question for you.
Okay.
So maybe you have a middle schooler, or maybe you have an elementary schooler, and their friends all have little girlfriends and boyfriends. And so, if a parent were to walk up to you and say, "Hey, what do you think about this? Should my elementary or my middle schooler start dating?" What would you say?
Good question. It does happen on the playground, especially. We would probably recommend that no, they're not ready to start dating. If you think back about our 2 M's and our 2 T's, are they mature enough? And are they doing it for the right motivations? The answer is probably no. And the timing definitely, it's a long ways from when they can actually get married and stuff. And so circling back to the purpose of dating is to lead towards marriage. And so I would say elementary and middle school is probably not the time to kind of start on that process. But don't freak out, because it does happen. And so I think when that comes home, when your child comes home and says, hey, I have a boyfriend, or hey, I have a girlfriend, don't freak out, but just kind of redefine it for them and say, hey, I'm really glad that you have a friend and she's a girl. But let's just have fun as friends and stuff, and kind of reframe it that she's just a good friend that you can get to know and hang out, and not classify it as a girlfriend or a boyfriend.
You kind of have to work on your poker face as a parent, and so this is a good way to practice that. Or you're like, oh,
Yeah.
tell me more what you mean about that.
Yes.
Because they may not even know what that is. They just heard it, and so they're going to try it on. I'm dating somebody.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Where are you going?
Yeah, right. Like, you're going to take them to the Sonic or what? I don't know.
Yeah,
So just just chill. Just don't freak out.
Yep. Don't make a big deal about it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're saying you can't date in elementary school, you're raining on that parade.
Okay. Yeah.
So when is it okay to date?
When is it okay to date? It's a good question. And I think that is a question that all families kind of wrestle with of, okay, when is that actual date line? You reach this age, so now go and have it. And so I think before we go into like, when should you, I think it's just good to say that, each family has different roles, and one isn't necessarily better than the other. They're just different. And so each family does need to pray about it and kind of decide when is the right time for their family, and maybe even for their specific kid, because
Sure.
each could be at a different level and stuff. So I'll just share what we've decided in the Hansen household is we have decided that there's no dating until 16, and then at 16 it becomes a conversation. So it isn't an automatic yes, it isn't an automatic no, but it becomes a conversation where we have a conversation with our child, and maybe even with who they're wanting to date, and talk through the motivation, the maturity, the timing, and just to see, okay, what's the why behind it. And so it is helpful if they can practice under your roof, because then you can kind of be more a part of the conversation and kind of help them and equip them. But they also need to be ready for it too. And so some kids will be ready in high school, some maybe not till college and stuff. So, but I think it's more of having it be a conversation versus a hard, fast rule is the approach that we're taking.
Once you've had that conversation, let's say that your child says, well, who should I date? Or if you're kind of evaluating and you're seeing your kids as friends, and so who should your teenager date? Then what kind of person
What
are you
kind of
looking
person?
for?
Well, I think the obvious answer is they should be a Christian. In 2 Corinthians 6:14, it says that we should not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. And so that would be kind of the deal breaker, that they need to love God. And I think what's important is you need to evaluate, you kind of attract people that are like you and stuff. So I think the first thing to think about is, am I living my life for the Lord? And am I loving him with my whole heart, mind, soul, and strength? Getting that all to roll off my tongue. And so you should be thinking about talking with your kids. Hey, how are you living? Like, are you living for the Lord, and that kind of stuff? And start there, and then kind of talk about the importance of aligning yourself with somebody who has the same values and the same morals. Mm-hmm. And then as they're getting more serious and stuff, just talking about, okay, what are their dreams? What are their goals? Does that line up with your dreams and your goals? And are they kind of going together? Somebody who has a similar interest. When I was in college, I wish I kept the sheet. Hopefully someday I'll come across it. But I came up with a list of like must-haves, like these are deal breakers. So like being saved, being a Christian was a deal breaker. It's a must-have. And then I had a middle list that was like, this would be nice to have. And so on that was somebody who was athletic. So like if it wasn't a deal breaker, but it'd be nice to have. And then I had a list of, this would be nice. And so on that was kind of like, I wanted somebody with dark hair, and I wanted somebody with blue eyes. Didn't quite get that, but it was one of those like, it's really honestly no big deal that he doesn't have blue eyes. I married a brown-eyed guy and I survived, and it's been great. But I think just talking with your kids about like, okay, what really is important and what would be a deal breaker, and then what is just kind of a nice to have, doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And I think just also just watching people, we have one daughter that's really good about people watching and just really knows, but just kind of seeing how do they act around their own family, how do they treat them, and how do they act around friends. That kind of gives you a better picture of who they truly are, because when you're dating, you are on your best behavior and stuff. So kind of seeing them in the more natural environments can also kind of give you a good picture of whether they'd be somebody you want to be around or be united with. So those are some things to think about when you're figuring out who you should date.
Good. So the next question, and this is a tricky one. So
Okay.
what should the rules be?
Oh, the rules.
Yeah.
Oh, I should have brought a Bible, because I think that's dating rules are in Romans.
Yeah, I think
Romans? Okay. Oh, how I wish that the Bible would have a line by line, like a 10 Commandments of dating. That would be nice. But unfortunately, we don't have that specific of rules for dating. And so I'm not going to give you rules for dating. But what we are going to talk about today is just things to think about and discussions that you should have, so that the expectations for your kids and their dating relationship are decided beforehand instead of in the heat of the moment. And so different things to kind of think about is when they're first starting, do you want it to be group dates or individual dates? Should their dates be kind of more in a public setting, or is it okay to be in a more private, intimate setting? Another thing to think about is when they're in your home, where can they go in your house? Is it only open public places like family rooms, or are they allowed to go to your child's bedroom and hang out? Different things to think about. Curfew is always a big one on the list, where I think a lot of arguments happen. So just talking ahead of time, what is curfew going to be? And when do you come in? And if you want to stay out past curfew, what are the proper steps to take to have those conversations? Riding in a car alone is another thing to think of. And then nowadays we need to talk about kind of phone expectations, texting, calling, how much, what time of day can that happen? And then this is also when, before they start dating, it's good to kind of have the conversations about the physical boundaries that they're going to set. What are they going to do? Where are their lines? And we'll talk about that more in another podcast. Mm-hmm. And then it's also good, hopefully they never get in this situation, but to kind of talk about what happens if they get in a situation where they feel unsafe or they feel pressured to do something that they don't want to do. How are they going to get out of that situation? So whether it's calling you and giving you a code word and you come pick them up, or teaching them how to say no, or teaching them how to remove themselves from a situation, are all good conversations to have. And then to kind of give a bigger picture, just having those conversations about, when you add drugs or alcohol or vaping into a situation, that lowers your ability to make wise choices. So while there's a lot of reasons why they shouldn't be doing that, especially in high school, because it's illegal and different things, but just also the consequences, it doesn't help you make wise choices, and how that relates to dating. And then also just keeping the right view on dating and marriage and that kind of stuff. Just kind of talking about when you watch movies and the musics that you listen to, those are planting seeds and are giving you pictures of what that person who created that thinks of marriage and thinks of dating and that kind of stuff. And so sometimes I think we can get the wrong ideas, especially Hallmark movies. We love Hallmark movies in our house, but all conflict isn't all wrapped up and made pretty in one conversation. And you don't often meet somebody and fall in love in a matter of 3 weeks and stuff. And so just kind of talking through okay, how does this represent reality and how does it not? And kind of talking them through that is all kind of good conversations to have as they go into dating.
Yeah, and that's really good. And all of those rules, again, they're not based on the Bible, and so they're based on biblical principles. They're based on biblical wisdom. They are trying to avoid biblical sin. So it's not like there's no truth, there's no foundation for it. And you really should talk about that with your kids. But since there isn't a curfew law within Leviticus, there is freedom for us to have a conversation with your kid and really kind of make it fit. And so really ultimately you're almost more interested in that relationship, in that conversation, and that trust that you're building with your child over time. And the rules can be kind of that proving ground for that trust and for that relationship. And so it can really be a pretty awesome thing as you're working through this together.
And it's a balance because you as an adult have lived life a lot longer and you've experienced the good and the bad and stuff. And so sometimes we'll want the rule a little more strict or a little more thing because we have been there, done that, or have experienced life and stuff. And so there will be pushback. But I think sometimes there's like, hey, I need you to trust me that this is the right decision. And then as the child gets older and as the child follows the rules and can be trusted and stuff, then there is certain rules that you can kind of adjust as they get older and as trust is being built.
Yeah, you don't want to just be fearful based on your own experiences that you've lived. You also do want to trust, and it takes some, parenting's not easy as they get older. You have to kind of just trust that they're going to go out and do their decisions that they're going to make. And by age 18 or so, they're going to go out and you'll have less control.
And that's why it's important to explain the why behind it and explain the principles in the Bible and stuff so that they can make those decisions later and know the truth behind it.
Yeah.
So that is our first podcast on Dating 101, where it's just kind of the basics about getting started and dating. And so in our next podcast in the dating part 2, we'll focus more on how to stay pure in the relationships and kind of that side of dating. So stay tuned for the next one.
Thanks.